Ave Maria in the Afternoon is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Welcome to Ave Maria in the Afternoon, examining the world through the lens of faith from the heart of the Church to help us navigate the culture. Here's Dr. Marcus Peter.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us on this hour of Ave Maria in the Afternoon. I'm Marcus Peter. As is the case every Thursday, my friend Dr. Matthew Bunson, Vice President and Editorial Director of EWTN News, will be joining us. We want to take a look at some key pieces of news that has taken place over the past week, some things that are of certain interest, one of which is the Catholic University of America will be formally publishing Pope Leo XIV's dissertation, his dissertation in his doctoral degree for canon law. Now, for many of us, that might sound like it's dry reading because it has to do with the canonical authority of the head of the Augustinian order. But it is a dissertation for a degree in canon law to begin with. But secondly, it also gives us an insight into the intellectual vision of Pope Leo XIV, especially as it pertains to leadership. And that's something that's going to come out once the book is out. And so I look forward to reading it personally, and I really encourage all of us, if you have the desire to procure a copy once CUA puts it out. We will also be talking about Pope Leo XIV's opening chapter as the new pontiff. He has completed over 100 days now, and his first 100 days have been marked not by disruption, but reassuring actions that show a return to tradition, a restoration of certain familiar papal customs, a sense of stability to a world that is clamoring, hungry for, and longing for it. And so there have been some comforting things that have happened already in the first 100 days of Pope Leo's papacy. We go on from there to speak with D.G. Hart. How did the Roman Catholics shift from being perceived as un-American to emerging as the standard bearers for political liberty and economic prosperity? I want to explore this particular theme of the rise of the American church during the Cold War. The reason why this conversation is crucial is because the church has a role to play in the socio-cultural functioning of the nations that she finds herself in. And so good Catholics make good citizens. This isn't something that has to be diametrically opposed or stand at dichotomy with each other. And what the United States has learned throughout its history, especially in recent history, is that it really is the good Catholics who come forth to become good leaders and good opinion leaders, good figures and good citizens. All this after the headlines.
Thanks, Marcus. Good afternoon, everyone. This is your Ave Maria Radio News for Thursday, August 14th. It's the Feast of St. Maximilian Kolbe. Today's news brought to you by Visiting Angels, providing loving care and assistance for seniors in need. VisitingAngels.com. There's a lot of unknowns surrounding President Trump's summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska tomorrow. Trump seeming unsure when asked by Fox News Radio about a joint press announcement by the White House and the Kremlin.
If something like that will happen, or if the meeting doesn't end well, I'll just have a press conference and head out. I'll head back to Washington.
Trump is meeting with Putin at a military base in Anchorage at around 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. At least 4 people are dead after an historic rain and flash flooding in Chattanooga. 2 adults and a child were killed when a tree was uprooted and fell on their SUV. Officials say they found the body of the missing man who was swept away by floodwaters Tuesday night. California Governor Gavin Newsom said to announce a plan to redraw the state's congressional maps and create more Democratic seats. Newsom says the effort will counter the Republican redistricting being planned in Texas, which is moving to redraw its congressional districts at President Trump's request so the GOP can maintain control after the 2026 elections. Washington, D.C. is seeing protests over the deployment of federal officers on the city streets. A protest erupted last night after police and federal agents set up a security checkpoint. A crowd of more than 100 gathered around it, heckling officers and directing vehicles away from the area. The crowd dispersed peacefully after the officers left. And some home buyers are now more willing to risk safety for affordability. A recent Redfin survey found 22% of home buyers would be willing to trade safety for affordability, while 27% said they compromise by giving up a low-crime area. More than 70% of those surveyed call personal safety and low crime must-haves. From your AveMariaRadio.net news desk, I'm Steve Clark.
Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. Joining me as he does every week is our friend Dr. Matthew Bunson, Vice President, Editorial Director of EWTN News. We are talking about church news and current events in light of church teaching. Matthew, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Oh, it's great to be with you, as always.
Always an honor to speak with you. Now, you're tremendously busy and you still carve out the time, and we're very grateful.
No, it is a privilege to be on. It's very much so. Plus, you just have, well, you and I have fun. I don't know about anyone else.
So, there's some happy news. Can you believe it? Do you remember that pit in your stomach as we were waiting in joyous anticipation for the declaration of the Holy Father? And it's been 100 days now.
It has, yeah. I mean, we just passed the third month mark on the 8th. He was elected on May 8th, so 3 months. But here we are. I know that in the world of politics, people love to focus on 100 days. We always think about the first 100 days of the president. But it makes sense. I mean, when you want to take a brief step back and assess what we have seen in the last 100 days, and it really has been quite a remarkable journey, hasn't it?
And considering the remarkable reality of these 100 days and what he has already accomplished, if you could just provide us an overarching view of some of the mountain pieces that we ought to keep in mind.
Yeah, well, I think the first to my mind, as we just stop and think for a moment about Pope Leo XIV, is just how remarkably smooth this transition has been from one pontificate to the next. Now, all popes settle in very quickly, as we saw certainly with Pope Francis. Within his first 100 days, we had some of the more memorable catch lines of the pontificate. I think, for example, who am I to judge? All of that. We got paying his hotel bills, traveling to Brazil, all of the things that were supposed to take place and did. And he really was carving out that the reality that this is going to be a very different pontificate. Pope Leo XIV has been, I'll use the word that a lot of the Italian media does, he has been positively serene in how his pontificate has unfolded in his first days. He has not done shocking things, but he has instead, I think, very calmly, prudently, temperately, serenely embraced the office to the point where it appears at times that he's almost subsumed into the office. And I think that is a really remarkable achievement. And so that is the first biggest takeaway, I think, as we reflect on his first days. And
even as we do so, like you and I have been talking about, he hasn't been explicitly pro-American in that sense, but he hasn't shirked away from the reality that he is a Chicago-born native of America.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, this isn't something that he's been shy from doing. He speaks, obviously, fluent Spanish, fluent Italian. He knows some French, he knows some Portuguese, he knows some German. But obviously, he is an American. And what we have seen in these first 100 days also is that he is quite comfortable and willing to speak English, American English, to different audiences, different addresses. And he has in some ways leaned into those great Chicago roots. No pope, as far as I'm aware in history, has ever donned a White Sox hat, nor has any pope that I can recall. Your audience can certainly correct me. I don't think we've ever seen a pope receive and promise to consume a Chicago deep dish pizza.
I was going to bring that up.
He received in St. Peter's Square. So there is certainly this American aspect to him, and it isn't like everything else of his pontificate. There isn't anything that's abrasive about it or anything that is sort of in your face. It's as though he's been doing this for a very long time.
Right.
And the fact that he is American is there. It's present. It's not something he's hiding from. It's not something that he refrains from discussing. In fact, he owns it, but in a way that is also very unobtrusive and very, one of the other words that I would use, is very natural.
And,
and very authentic, too.
Which is a lot to say considering he's very new in the job.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, you have somebody who it's been about 100 days since the time of his election. And yet, and this goes back to one of the other big points, that it feels as though he's been Pope for a very long time. And it isn't that the days are dragging out. It's just that the comfort level that's already there. But I think part of the reason for that is, and this is one of those key words too in appreciating this pontificate, is continuity. He is somebody who, like Francis, will use very powerful gestures. But in the case of Leo, these are gestures that point toward continuity with his predecessors. So it's why, for example, everyone was so struck when he came out on the loggia on the day of his election wearing the red mozzetta. Why he has been using vestments from previous pontificates. Mm-hmm. Why he carried, for example, the pastoral staff of designed by Leo Scorcelli that was used by Pope St. Paul VI, but especially became one of the great symbols of the pontificate of Pope St. John Paul II. That is sort of his pastoral staff. And he speaks very, very regularly and quotes Pope Francis. So he certainly does see himself as the successor to Pope Francis, but he also sees himself as the successor to all of the other popes, especially the most modern ones. So in that sense, he speaks from a position of continuity.
Undoubtedly, we have certain questions about the direction of some issues that, or at least some decisions that were made during the Francis papacy, the liturgy wars being one of them, but in synodality and the ambiguity pertaining to the term and its application. But all things considered, what we can say about Pope Leo is he really has shown himself to be quite the Pontifex Maximus, the bridge builder.
Yes, that's right. And if we're using words at 100 days to describe different aspects of this pontificate, we've talked about continuity, we've talked about serenity. I think one of those other key words is unity. He has talked about unity in the church and forging unity across the globe, really since the day of his election. And to your point, as we look at the big questions that are facing us, synodality is one, the traditional Latin Mass, what to do with Traditionis Custodes. In these early days, I think one thing that is becoming apparent is that, at least for the moment, he's comfortable with relying on the great concept of subsidiarity. He is allowing bishops, when it comes to the traditional Latin Mass, to proceed as they see fit for what is best for their particular diocese. Now, is that going to be able to continue? I don't know. But so far, we have seen two different approaches to this. We had, for example, I think in the Diocese of San Angelo in Texas, the granting of Bishop Michael Sis's request to allow traditional Latin Mass to continue at a parish church, but at the same time, Archbishop Edward Weisenberger, the recently installed Archbishop of Detroit, has actually essentially eradicated or eliminated the traditional Latin Mass. We wanted over a dozen parishes in the Archdiocese of Detroit. So two very, very different approaches to this. Mm-hmm. But I think Pope Leo sees this as a way of proceeding that is very respectful of the rights of diocesan bishops. We're going to see how this ties into his vision for unity in the life of the church. And I think that's one of the big decisions that is going to be coming up in the next couple of months that he's going to have to make.
Like you mentioned, we await seeing how all this shakes out. I want to move on to some happier news pertaining to Pope Leo. We know that Catholic University wants to publish his dissertation. What do we know about this? Yeah,
well, we know that he completed and then defended a dissertation for a doctorate in canon law, the initial letter JCD, at the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas, Anglicum in Rome. He defended the dissertation in 1987, so we're talking about almost 40 years ago. And
so let's do that on the other side of the break, Matthew.
Absolutely.
My guest is Dr. Matthew Bunson, Vice President, Editorial Director of EWTN News. We are continuing the conversation on the other side of the break about church news, and right now we're talking about CUA publishing Pope Leo's dissertation. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.
No one should ever have to choose between feeding their family and keeping their heat on. Impossible questions like rent or diapers demand answers every day, likely in your very own neighborhood, but you can help. Hope Clinic partners with you to provide free medical, dental, food, and behavioral health care, all in Jesus' name. While others face impossible choices, your choice is an easy one. Partner with Hope Clinic today. Find out how at www.thehopeclinic.org.
Support for this Ave Maria radio program comes in part by the non-for-profit St. Anthony Services. Are you shopping for mortgage products, Catholic investing, Catholic health, real estate, or estate planning? StAnthonyServices.org can help you find a Catholic professional for these needs. They regularly connect faithful citizens with faith-based professionals that share our Christian values. More information at StAnthonyServices.org or 877-LIFE-US1.
Hi, I'm Dr. Marcus Peter, host of Ave Maria in the Afternoon and Unveiling the Covenants. Ave Maria Radio has been at the forefront of dialoguing faith at the intersection of all things pertaining to human flourishing. We need your help. Our infrastructure is in urgent need of updating. We want to ask you to support us in this summer campaign. Every gift, no matter how big or small, will be useful to bringing the gospel to the ends of the earth. Thank you. You are broadcasting hope with us.
Ave Maria in the Afternoon is underwritten by the following nonprofit organization: Real Estate for Life. Buying or selling your home or business property? Real Estate for Life can connect you with one of 1,400 pro-life real estate agents around the world. When Real Estate for Life receives a referral fee, they donate 70% to Ave Maria Radio and Human Life International. More information at realestateforlife.org or 877-LIFE-US1. That's realestateforlife.org.
Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter, talking with Dr. Matthew Bunson, Vice President, Editorial Director of EWTN News. Matthew, I want to pick up where we left off. So, like you mentioned, CUA is publishing Pope Leo's dissertation.
Yeah, that's right. So this was the dissertation that he completed, we were just saying, in 1987 as part of the whole program. So he earned his licentiate there in 1985 and then earned his doctorate there in 1987. And, of course, if you've worked on a dissertation, you have to defend it. So he successfully defended it. The topic is the office and authority of the local prior in the Order of St. Augustine. Now, it sounds dry. This is, after all, a doctoral dissertation.
For canon law.
And canon law. So, yes, it's going to be a little dry. However, and this is why I think there is a heightened interest on a lot of people's part in reading this, because what this dissertation does is it certainly focuses, as the title would say, on the role of priors, in other words, the individual within the community who is superior, the local superior among his Augustinian brothers. Mm-hmm. And it includes, though, various insights into the place of church authority, what it means to be an Augustinian, what it means to follow the rule of St. Augustine and to apply it, to live it, but then also as a person in authority to apply the rule. And then looking at the mission of the priesthood. So all of those are encompassed under the umbrella of what it means to have an office and authority. So what this gives us is a bit of a glimpse. Again, we have to remember this is 40 years ago, into the mind, the formative mind of the future pope, and how he envisions good government ought to be. And one thing, too, that as more information comes out about this dissertation is that we're looking at a conception of spirituality, of the spiritual life, that what does it do? It looks very intently at the work of grace in our lives, in that great Augustinian tradition. And we can see how that has played out in subsequent years, because Robert Francis Prevost the time of his election, had been an Augustinian for 55 years. He's going on 56 years as a member of the Augustinian order. That has shaped him deeply, and because of that, it is going to shape his pontificate deeply. And so I think to have this published, I think will very much give us a snapshot into his mind.
Right.
Again, with the understanding that this was decades ago, in much the same way that we could see into the mind of Karol Wojtyła in his dissertation on John of the Cross, and Joseph Ratzinger and his dissertation.
Like you mentioned, considering this, and given the fact that he's so new, and even when he took the papal chair, we still don't know a lot about how he thinks, and so the mind of Leo, to the degree that we know it, has been promising, but at the same time remains rather inscrutable. So this will be an avenue where we get an insight into his canonical administrative procedures, or at least his perspective.
Yeah, that's right. It's a snapshot into his mind, and what formed him leading into the papacy. The other big thing that's notable in this published dissertation by the Catholic University of America Press is that the foreword is going to be written by a name that's known to many in your audience, and that's Father Thomas Joseph White, who is one of the most famous Dominicans and theologians in the world. He's also rector. He's now rector magnificus, I think, of the Angelicum in Rome. And so he is writing as rector of the Pontifical University where Robert Prevost studied and earned his doctorate. And, of course, Prevost, Leo XIV, is now the most prominent, famous, living graduate of the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas. He is an alum. And that, I think, is something, too, that the Catholic University of America wants to celebrate, but especially the Dominicans do.
I certainly think that's exactly true. And again, that there's much to be celebrated in that regard. We're running out of time. I want to pivot very quickly to what he's been doing administratively also in terms of expanding paternity leave. And again, we're getting a slightly deeper insight into the kind of Pope he hopes to be.
Yeah, that's right. So one of the things that we are starting to see is how he is approaching many of the unanswered questions or unsettled business left behind by Pope Francis. And again, that's not in any way a criticism of Pope Francis. It's that his passing left questions. And one of them was what the Vatican was going to do with some of its benefits for families. And what we have just seen is the approval of the expansion of benefits for Vatican employees with children, especially on the side of paternity leave, and also those who are raising children with various challenges and disabilities. It leaves unchanged, I think, what is actually a pretty remarkable thing, which is the Vatican grants 6 months of maternity leave, including the month leading up to the 30 days leading up to birth, and then 5 months after, with greater flexibility down that road, too. In this case now, the new policy pertains to fathers. So what this will do is it formalizes what Pope Francis had already begun doing in January, which was 5 days of paternity leave. And also it raises the age of children who could be covered, for example, by the Vatican's family law. Now, why does this matter? It matters because the Holy See itself is very much embracing the recognition of the importance of family life, and administratively is putting that into action. And let's not forget that while through the public imagination, people tend to think that the Vatican is nothing but the Pope, cardinals, bishops, and some men and women religious. In fact, there are several thousand lay people who work in the Vatican, in the Holy See. There's everything from postal workers to police to the so-called San Pietrini, those who work in St. Peter's, that sort of thing. And so family life being encouraged like this is a very important thing. And so I think any step like this is a very good one and will be a very welcome one. I
couldn't agree more. So again, to pivot one more time, just as we're running out of time, 10 years after ISIS, we're talking about the Syriac saint that Alberto Fernandez highlighted.
Yeah, so here we are looking at the 10th anniversary of the horror of ISIS. And when ISIS took parts of Syria, one of the things they did was to desecrate one of these great and magnificent tombs, and in particular the destruction of the Syriac Catholic monastery of Mar Elian and the tomb of the saint. And some of those images are very much seared in the minds of everyone who is watching the absolute efforts, the eradication of the Christian presence. And this is a tomb that dates back many, many centuries. And here we are marking the 10-year anniversary of that. And I would encourage everyone to go to ncregister.com and read a great piece by Ambassador Alberto Fernandez, who looks back on those 10 years and looking also at the restored tomb of this very, very important part of Christian history.
And it's a part of Christian history that we need to keep at the forefront of our conversation, because Mar Elian and his bones, they represent a continued standing forth, a stalwart standing for the Christian faith amidst even the worst of persecution.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Of hope, even though the numbers of Christians in that part of the world, in the Nineveh Plain in Syria, has much reduced, and there are a lot of major and troubling questions as to what is going to happen in Syria, given the new regime that's in power there. But this is an opportunity for us to look back a decade ago and not to forget. The world moves on very quickly from things like this.
Yep.
And it comes at a time, too, when there are persecutions and such severe violence against Christians everywhere, but I think in particular in sub-Saharan Africa.
Matthew, always a joy to connect with you. Thank you very much for making the time.
Same here. Privilege to be with you. God bless.
God bless you. My guest has been Dr. Matthew Bunson, Vice President, Editorial Director of EWTN News. We've talked about church news and current events. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.
Michigan's Catholic Biblical School Ministry unpacks every book of the Bible to deepen your relationship with God. Engaging talks from live expert teachers make reading the Bible a prayerful, inspiring part of our faith. These adult faith formation classes start this September in dozens of parish locations and online. Learn more at cbsmich.org. That's cbsmich.org.
Honey, did you ever call Mighty Dog Roofing of Ann Arbor for that free roof inspection?
I knew I forgot something.
Roof leaks can cause mold buildup or even roof collapse. Protect your family today by calling local Catholics Dan and Mary Flanagan at Mighty Dog Roofing for a free inspection of your roof, siding, or windows. Mighty Dog Roofing, 734-224-4916. That's 734-224-4916.
As Catholics, it's not always easy to share our faith with others. As a St. Paul Center member, you'll have access to a growing library of online scripture and theology content with Scott Hahn, John Bergsma, and other leading scholars to help you encounter Christ in Scripture and empower you to share your faith confidently. Know Christ, share Christ. Get started free at stpaulcenter.com/ave. That's stpaulcenter.com/ave.
Strained or broken relationships are a given in most of our lives. Friends fall away, siblings drift apart, children sever ties with their parents, and despite our best efforts, these painful fissures are difficult to mend. Hi, I'm Dr. Ray. If you want to learn how to communicate better with the difficult people in your life and be a more easygoing, more forgiving person, check out my book, How to Get Along with Almost Everybody. Check it out, and all my other books on the store page at AveMariaRadio.net. That's AveMariaRadio.net.
Hi, it's Teresa Tomeo from Catholic Connection. Not having a will puts an unnecessary burden on your children. At mycatholicwill.com, a legal will is as simple as 15 minutes filling out information about your family. The standard cost, only $79.95. However, thanks to our partnership with mycatholicwill.com, when you use a promo code AVE, that's AVE, your will is absolutely free. No hidden costs whatsoever. So visit mycatholicwill.com.
When the need for senior care arises, home is where the heart is. Visiting Angels provides home care for mom or dad up to 24 hours per day, including personal care, meals, and light housework. You may select your professional caregiver with Visiting Angels. More information at visitingangels.com or at 877-374-LIVE. That's 877-374-LIVE. Visiting Angels, America's choice in senior home care.
This program brought to you in part by Ave Maria, Florida, a big kind of small town where golf carts take you everywhere and there's always something fun around the corner. Discover championship golf, resort-style amenities, and a town center full of shopping and dining. With Ave Maria University and Ave Maria Catholic Church at its heart, it's a community full of connection and charm. More than 25 model homes are available for viewing. More information can be found at AveMaria.com. That's AveMaria.com.
Underwritten in part by the following nonprofit.
Are you paying high prices with a traditional health insurance company that pays for things that violate your conscience? There's an alternative available. Solidarity HealthShare is a community of faithful individuals and families that never share into immoral medical services, all while saving you money with prices starting as low as $85 per month for singles and $512 for families. Never fund another abortion with your healthcare dollars. Call 844-313-4999 to learn more.
Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. During the Second Vatican Council, under the minds of John the 23rd and Paul the 6th, we saw that the Church adopted a certain lexicon, if you will, for religious relationships, particularly with civil government. And so the language of liberal democracy, the language of religious liberty, even ecumenism, came to a greater forefront in the life of the Church. Joining me to talk about the faith of Catholicism in America, especially during the Cold War and just immediately after the Cold War, is Darryl G. Hart, the author of American Catholic. Darryl, it's great to speak with you. How are you?
I'm fine. Good to talk to you again.
I greatly enjoy connecting with you, and this book it presents tremendous insight in terms of the place, if you will, for being a faithful Catholic while also being a patriotic citizen of the United States of America. And so I want to begin by asking you to talk about what is the perceived tension here between being faithfully Catholic and being a citizen, especially historically.
Well, that's a really big question, but I think to simplify it is the aftershocks of the French Revolution in Europe in particular were very difficult for the Roman Catholic Church, and understandably so, because the French were not good neighbors, and the French, and Napoleon in particular, invaded Rome, and the Pope at the time, and the number and the name I'm forgetting, but the Pope had to go into exile. But back in France as well, the French clergy needed to take oaths of allegiance to the French government, such as it was then. It went through various stages. So Rome's reaction to the French Revolution was very negative, and again, it's very understandable for that reason. And I think some in Europe looked at the American Revolution through similar lens, because it was also the formation of a republic. It was also a kind of revolution. It was throwing off the tyranny of King George, etc.
Right.
Even though I think lots of scholars would make the case, and I'm partial. I mean, I like the United States a lot, and I do try to argue that the American Revolution was different from the French Revolution. The American Revolution had a conservative aspect to it, and I don't think that's overdoing it, whereas the French Revolution was much more radical. Yeah. So in the 19th century, you have a series of conservative popes. I mean, I think in some ways all popes are conservative in a way, but really hammering down on modern developments. The encyclical... I'm sorry, the Syllabus of Errors, published in 1864, is an example of the Vatican saying they're not going to cooperate with modern liberal society in almost any form. But Pope Leo XIII, who comes along in after some of these conservative popes, is a more moderate stance. After him comes another couple of conservatives, both Pius X and XI. So American Roman Catholics are sort of caught in between enjoying relative freedom and a decent way of life in the United States, even though the American church is very much an immigrant church throughout the 19th century. But still, many of the bishops in America and the priests think that the United States, despite Protestant bigotry, which was there, and there was a lot of anti-Catholicism, and sometimes it could become violent, but still it was a much better existence than a lot of people expected. So that's the kind of conundrum. Fast forwarding to the 20th century, though, the American church, members of the church, are losing their immigrant status. They're becoming middle class and university graduates, and even then, they're still appreciating the United States as a very good kind of society. The American founding being pretty good. There's still remnants of anti-Catholicism, a best-selling book by Paul Blanchard in 1949, I believe, called American Freedom and Catholic Power, or something like those are the words in the title. Basically, again, charging the church with this kind of authoritarianism in contrast to American freedom. But John Courtney Murray, a very important theologian of the 20th century, counters that by arguing that the American founding actually drew on natural law and some ideas from the medieval world and tried to harmonize the American founding with Roman Catholic teaching. And, he got a lot of criticism later. In his day, he got a lot of criticism from Vatican officials, not so much from the papacy directly, but he was told to shut it down and not to publish on church and state matters in the 1950s. So those are some of the tensions between the church's reaction to the French Revolution, but also the American Revolution, the American system of government being different, and many American Roman Catholics enjoying American society in ways that European Roman Catholics are kind of like suspicious and don't really think it's really all that.
And you really see, especially during the Cold War era, that American Catholicism enters into a kind of defining intersection, or a defining period, I should say, because up until that point, there's still a bit of a marginalized, or at least a religious subset on the margins. But during that time, you see the rise of the push of anti-communism, but also a few intellectuals that you highlight, Schlafly and Buckley, and John F. Kennedy. And so all of a sudden, you're seeing that Catholicism is finding a foothold within the American identity, and then eventually that gives way into a kind of Americanism.
Right. And I think what Roman Catholics like Buckley, like Schlafly did, I guess, and I don't know how good a Roman Catholic John F. Kennedy was, but it was still a notable development in American history for a Roman Catholic to become president of the United States. And I think he ran a good campaign. He appealed to Protestants broadly. There were reasons why you could imagine the bishops of the American church being upset with him. He took a hard stand against any kind of public aid for parochial schools, said he would not support it, which was pretty much a linchpin of the way Protestants viewed relationship between the American government and parochial schools. But it really, and I think it's continued since the 1960s, that American Roman Catholics have really enjoyed, and American society, I would also argue, has benefited from the insights, wisdom, reflection of Roman Catholics who, you could argue have come into their own since the 1960s. Current situation is a little bit maybe different, and those voices are saying some things that maybe weren't said as much back then, and we can talk about that, but still, I myself am a Protestant, and I've studied a lot evangelical Protestants considerably, and evangelical Protestants have not in any way upped their game the way Roman Catholics have. There are all sorts of reasons for that, but there was a time 20 years ago when people were talking about the evangelical mind and evangelical scholarship being considerable, and there were aspects of that, but it wasn't anywhere near the kind of achievement that Roman Catholics have enjoyed in the United States. And, one way you can point to that is 5 Supreme Court justices are Roman Catholic, and I don't know that anyone comes close. The evangelicals, for instance, have come close to that.
I'm talking with Darryl G. Hart. He is an historian and the author of American Catholic, The Politics of Faith During the Cold War. And we're talking about understanding how the Catholic Church in America developed in terms of especially its social foothold and even the rise of liberal Catholicism. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.
Every woman deserves specialized health care. At Arbor Women Health, our team of compassionate professionals listen to our patients and want to understand what they're going through. They serve everyone from teen girls to seniors. Our faith-based clinicians specialize in obstetrics, gynecology, fertility awareness and crisis, or unexpected pregnancies. Call 734-930-4020 or visit arborwomenhealth.org. Arbor Women, faith-inspired, dignity-affirming healthcare.
The Sistine Chapel is coming to Detroit on September 4th, and we invite you to join us for the ultimate VIP experience at St. John's Resort in Plymouth. Members of the Sistine Chapel Choir, Sixtini Cantoris, are returning to Detroit together with Dr. Elizabeth Lev to present the sights and sounds of Michelangelo's masterpiece. Share a private Mass celebrated by Archbishop Weisenberger in the serene Saints Mary and Joseph Chapel, followed by an exclusive dinner with distinguished guests. Finish the evening with reserved VIP seating at the main concert in the brand new Monarch Ballroom at St. John's Resort. Secure your VIP experience now for the celebration of sacred tradition, artistic genius, and the eternal harmony between faith and culture. This is a once-in-a-lifetime experience you will not want to miss. Visit our website at www.ctscentral.net for sponsorship information.
St. Therese once told her sister Celine that when we trust ourselves and not God, our soul becomes barren and incapable of virtue. Her remedy? External works of charity. We all try to do it on our own sometimes without asking for God's help. At St. Paul Evangelization, we suggest sharing the gospel with someone who needs it. Check out streetevangelization.com to find a team near you where you can share the love of Jesus. If there isn't one in your area yet, perhaps God is calling you to start a team in your city. To learn more, visit streetevangelization.com.
Hello, Steve Ray here from Footprints of God Pilgrimages. The land of our Lord and Our Lady is calling us. We're heading back to the Holy Land over Christmas break this year. We have the best, most reliable guides and services awaiting us. The holy sites are open, and the local Christians are anxious to see us. Galilee, Jerusalem, Nazareth, Bethlehem. No crowds, no lines. Hope you can join us.
Find the Ave Maria Radio travel tab at avemariaradio.net. Do you own popular index mutual funds or ETFs? If so, you're automatically owned shares of companies that conflict with your moral beliefs. Ave Maria mutual funds are managed to conform to pro-life and pro-family values. Long-term investors can invest in the no-load Ave Maria mutual funds. The experienced professional portfolio managers make decisions based on investment fundamentals and pro-life values. You can learn more about Ave Maria mutual funds today at 866-AVE-MARIA or visit AveMariaFunds.com.
Honey, did you ever call Mighty Dog Roofing of Ann Arbor for that free roof inspection?
I knew I forgot something.
Roof leaks can cause mold buildup or even roof collapse. Protect your family today by calling local Catholics Dan and Mary Flanagan at Mighty Dog Roofing for a free inspection of your roof, siding, or windows. Mighty Dog Roofing, 734-224-4916. That's 734-224-4916. Ave Maria School of Law is the Roman Catholic law school in the United States. Consistently ranked in the Princeton Review as one of the best and most conservative law schools, as well as pre-law's most devout law school. Ave Maria School of Law provides a traditional legal education while emphasizing how the law intersects with the Catholic intellectual tradition and natural law philosophy. Ave Maria School of Law, unabashedly Catholic, consistently excellent. For more information, visit avemarialaw.edu.
Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter, talking with Darryl G. Hart, who is an historian, and we're talking about American Catholic, his book on the politics of faith during the Cold War. Darryl, as you were mentioning earlier, Catholics in America eventually came into their own and they're a position of good standing in terms of the American populace. But this wasn't without initial teething problems. If you could comment also how there was a rise of what one might call liberal Catholicism here in America with the witness of faith that JFK put forth in the public sphere.
Well, I mean, I think part of the answer to that has to involve the Second Vatican Council and what the council may have opened up. And again, listeners should take what I say with a grain of salt because I'm a Protestant looking at this, but I have read and I do follow lots of Roman Catholics on Vatican II, and you get very mixed discussions of that among Roman Catholics. Some, the progressive wing of the church thinks it's great and thinks it kind of set the tone for the church for the last 60 years. Others would say it had lots of flaws, but on the ground, whatever you make of it, and I do think that there was, the way you introduced the previous segment by talking about the way the church accommodated modernity, it's a remarkable change in 100 years to go from the syllabus of errors to the positions that the Second Vatican Council staked out, especially with regard to religious liberty.
Right.
And a lot of American bishops interpreted that as saying, see, this is what we've been arguing all along, and it seemed to be a vindication of John Courtney Murray. Now, if you go deep into the background readings of the bishops at the Second Vatican Council, you'll see that there are European arguments for religious freedom that don't map directly onto, say, the American understandings of it, but still, it's a remarkable change. But aside from all that, the intellectual developments of Vatican II, life on the ground, I mean, it had been the church in America had been a very conservative, somewhat parochial, fairly parochial. It was beginning to lose that in the 1950s with suburbanization, leaving the so-called ghettos and going off and becoming middle class and all that. Okay, that is happening in the 50s. But Vatican II seemed to say that the older ways that we've been a church are not necessary anymore.
Right.
And, so you see the numbers among the religious decline, that enrollments in parochial schools declines dramatically, on and on and on. Gary Wills, who's a liberal American Catholic, wrote a book about this, Bare Ruin Choirs, I believe is the name of it. It's really, it's a lament for what's happening to the church, even though Wills himself probably would have agreed with the bishops in a lot of ways, but what had been kind of an airtight culture or subculture now begins to lose that. And I still think the American church is trying to figure that out. I don't know that it's done it yet, and I don't know that they can get much help from Europeans, which is a very different society in many ways. I mean, yes, it's Western, yes, it's liberal democracy and lots of economic similarities, but still, my perception is that the church in Europe has kind of elitism built into it that the American church does not, and that's partly why Leo XIV, the current pope, is really kind of intriguing because he comes out of the background of an immigrant church here in the United States, and now he's at the highest level of the church, and how that's going to play out very difficult, but that's getting way ahead of the story.
Yeah, and I'd like to draw back a little bit to closer to that time period of the 50s and the 60s, considering the influence of, so you had JFK, who was putting forth a notion of religious neutrality in how he lived his American political identity. And then you also had some brilliant thinkers, like we mentioned, so William Buckley, Leo Boesel, Gary Wills, and regardless of their splitting, one of the things that they put forth was that Catholicism was in fact compatible with a lot of the fundamental driving ideals and constitutional frameworks of the United States of America. If you could comment on that and how that influenced Catholic life in the sociopolitical sphere, please.
Well, I mean, I think the conservative movement in particular, such as it's known, William F. Buckley is more or less the godfather of that movement, which, you know, led to the nomination of Barry Goldwater in 1964, and then eventually Ronald Reagan in 1980, which was sort of the high water mark of the conservative movement. But Buckley started the magazine National Review. I used to work at an institution called the Institute, Intercollegiate Studies Institute, ISI, in Wilmington, Delaware. It's kind of an academic, educational institution, sponsors kind of curricular work for college and university students in the United States. And Buckley was a president for a very brief time, pretty much in name only, but of that. But the kind of conservatism that ISI taught and still does teach, although it's changing somewhat, was very much shaped by the John Courtney Murray, William F. Buckley understanding of the compatibility between Roman Catholic faith and the American forms of government. Now, I mean, there were Protestants who bought into that view as well, usually more mainline than evangelical, but so it wasn't in any way a kind of sectarian or parochial understanding of the American founding and American government. It was capacious enough to include Jews as well in that understanding, but that really was the backbone of the conservative political movement, and it has Roman Catholic fingerprints all over it. And, you know, there would be other sources in the church, though. Commonweal comes to mind, but America, the Jesuit magazine as well, who would have been critical of that view and probably still more oriented to the New Deal of FDR and the kind of welfare programs, especially that came to America, became part of American society during the New Deal. So there is that tension between, say, an FDR outlook and kind of Ronald Reagan's Morning in America view, but still that conservative political outlook was very important, obviously, with 2 presidential nominations, and I think still even George W. Bush was trying to run in that lane in some way, and a guy like Father Richard John Newhouse, who started First Things magazine, a convert to Rome from Lutheran background, was also updating that Buckley kind of view, and he was reaching out to evangelicals more, and he really did, I think, help to bring evangelicals into that conservative intellectual and political movement.
If we consider that the kind of communism and socialism of the Cold War era became, for want of a better expression, a kind of ecumenical clarion call wherein Catholics could show that they were, in fact, united with their conservative biblical counterparts, their Protestant brothers and sisters. Comment then on Clarence Mannion and his take, especially looking at things like the New Deal.
It's been a while since I've looked at anything by Clarence Mannion, but I mean, I do think you're pointing to a strain of conservatism that Roman Catholic thinkers like Mannion, and Buckley was somewhat in this orbit, as well as Brett Boesel, who saw, I don't think they saw communism in the New Deal, but they certainly saw
socialism.
A socialist drift in the New Deal, and argued, and I think it's a fair argument.
Yep.
I don't know that you want to. I don't know that I would be comfortable saying it was socialist or communist. I mean, it could lead that way, but I think their argument that it was out of line with the American Constitution and what the federal government should do is actually a plausible argument. And Mannion was, I believe, the dean of the law school at Notre Dame, and so he had some legal chops to make that case. And, I think part of what the conservative movement had to try to figure out, and Reagan, who himself was a New Deal Democrat who then turned Republican, when he saw what unions were like, having been the head of the Actors Guild in Hollywood for a time, I think they had to figure out how not to touch the third rail of Social Security and some of those programs from the New Deal. So, and that's still very much a problem for conservatives, whether they are Bush, a Reagan, or a Trump kind of conservative.
Right.
But still, I mean, what Buckley and those other thinkers around him, Mannion included, pointed to was the problems of the New Deal, and the question then is how politically viable is that? Do you get votes with that or not? And I think part of what we've seen, you don't get the votes, but the intellectual argument still, I think, is compelling.
Yeah. Now, we're completely running out of time. I would have loved to draw this to a head with talking about the rightful place of patriotism while still holding fidelity to Christ. But, Darryl, this was a truly enlightening conversation. Thank you for making the time.
Well, it was great to talk to you, and again, it's always good to be with you. Thanks.
My guest has been Darryl Hart. He is the author of American Catholic, The Politics of Faith During the Cold War. And we've been revisiting this in light of conversations about where we ought to hold the place of our faith and our operations in the socio-political sphere. Christ is still Lord over all, including over the United States. Thank you for joining us. I'm Marcus Peter.